I am so excited today to be starting on Enneagram Type 8. I'm kind of moving into that portion of the Enneagram. 8s are, they're just some of my most favorite people in the entire world. Didn't always used to be that way, but I think that's another story for another time. But anyways, so I'm really excited to kind of jump into this, and as I have done with all of the other numbers, I'm going to start by jumping into what 8 with 7 looks like versus 8 with 9 before we do like an actual video on Type 8. It's just how I prefer to do it. So I want to say this just as a way of introduction for Enneagram Type 8. If you are considering whether or not you are an Enneagram 8 with 7 or an 8 with 9, I want you to know that it is extremely it's very easy to tell the difference. This is not a confusing thing. If I were going to sum it up, like the easiest thing to look for, if I were going to sum it up in one sentence, I would say Enneagram Type 8, if it has a 7 wing, they don't know when to quit, and they do not give up, and they don't take no for an answer. If it is an 8 with a 9 wing, they will push. They will fight, they're not just going to bow down, but it's like it's like they know they've reached a limit and there's just nothing more that they can do, and they're willing to give up and divert their energy towards something that they can successfully achieve. That seems to be the difference. So in a nutshell, I would say 8 with 7 doesn't know when to quit. 8 with 9 knows when to quit. That's basically the biggest difference. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Again, I'm going to use my it's a little Enneagram app, and it just gives you some very basic bullet points about each of the types if you're trying to find your own type, and it's literally just called Enneagram. It's what I've been using the entire time. I use it just as pointers, and then I build off of that. I kind of agree or disagree with that, just depending. So 8s with a 7 wing add a lightheartedness to the usually more serious 8 outlook. Yeah, that's true. I would say that that's really true. When you have an 8 with a 9 wing, 8s in general are serious people. They're intense people, and they're not intentionally intense. And I don't mean that they're emotionally intense. I mean that their energy that they carry with them is intense. 8s just always have this energy about them that they're trying to force life to work with them the way that they want it to work. I'll give you an example. I have a very good friend of mine who is an 8 on the Enneagram, and there was one particular day where like his car broke down, and he needed me to come and pick him up and take him someplace. So I came and I picked him up and I took him someplace. And it was just maybe 5 minutes down the street. I mean, we weren't even in the car for 10 minutes together. But just having to drive him from one place to another, I even like remember consciously thinking after he got out of the car, I was just kind of like, and it wasn't because he was like being mean or anything like that. He just had this energy about him, and we were closed up in the small cab of this car together, and he was directing the energy onto the traffic and the other drivers, and he was telling me how to drive, and he was trying to give directions and talk about how to maneuver the traffic at the same time, and this is what I should do, and this is why, and why am I not doing that? This is what he would do. Hurry, 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 go now. Oh, you just lost your moment. You need to stop letting these people push you around on the road, kind of a thing. And it was just this intense, like 5-minute car ride. And that's an example. Had I asked him, or had I made a comment to him at that time, had I said anything to him about, stop being so pushy, why are you so bossy, stop telling me how to drive, he would have been surprised. He would have said, I'm not being pushy, I'm not telling you how to drive, I just saw that and just made a comment about what I saw, because they don't realize that they're doing that. But that's true of any Enneagram type. You've lived so much in your type, and you're so accustomed to your behavioral patterns that you don't realize that you're doing it anymore. Which is why having people that love you very much, who are willing to speak into you about what they see, is such a helpful thing to have, because it really gives you a better perspective of who you are. So anyways, with all of that being said, I'm trying to paint a picture for you of someone that is a very intense individual, not emotionally, just with energy and force, okay? Just their will, their ability to exercise and enforce or create, or to instigate is probably a better word, change is very great. You can feel that. So when you have a 7 wing, they tend to be a little bit more playful. They're not necessarily as serious, because life to them, when you're an 8 and you have a 7 wing, life is like, I don't know, it's like you're just perpetually living in Six Flags or something, or I don't know, a theme park. Pick a theme park, Disney World, whatever. They just kind of get up each day, and everything is a roller coaster that could give them a potential thrill, and so they want to go and attack the things that they think are going to give them the biggest thrills and maximize the thrill, because it's just like this. It's the 7 sin of gluttony and the 8 sin of lust mixed all together. Can you imagine what it would look like if you were just predominantly overrun with both lust and gluttony? It's just this insatiable need to take in the pleasurable aspects of life in intense forms, right? And that looks different for every 8, because every 8 will have a different perspective of what they consider to be an intense pleasure for them. So it's not necessarily bad things, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, although it could be, but not necessarily. So I would say that that's true, versus when they have a 9 wing, I will say they do tend to be a little bit more serious. They tend to be, when it's an 8 with a 9 wing, the perspective on life isn't so much that life is an opportunity for them to be happy or to experience intense pleasure. It's more about life is a strategic game plan that needs to be thought out and adapted to. And that may even not have been the right way to say it. That's the best way that comes to me right now. So when you have a 9 wing, it does tend to ground them a little bit more than the 7 wing does. But I will say too, the 8s that I've known that have 9 wings, the energy is just a little intense there, because again, if you're an 8 with a 7 wing, you don't know when to quit. My friend, by the way, from my example earlier, who had, his car broke down and I had to pick him up, he had a 7 wing, so he's just like massively intense. Listen, if you're an 8 and you have a 7 wing, I want you to know you are the most intense personality on the entire Enneagram spectrum, period. As I like to say, I saw like a little kind of plaque one time that you put on the wall, and it said something about please take responsibility for the energy that you bring into the room. And I really like that. It made me think of 8s with 7 wings. It makes me think of all aggressive numbers, really. But I saw that, and I'm like, I just wish I could almost just tell this to every 8 that has a 7 wing. You need to know that you've got the most intense energy out of all of the Enneagram types. And, I love you. I love you. I really do. I love you. But just please be responsible with the energy that you bring into the room, because you bring like a whole lot of energy to the room. Sometimes the room's not capable of holding it all. Okay? So that was my 2 cents right there. Take that for what it's worth to you. The energy isn't as intense when it's a 9 wing. It's really a bit more grounded. Still energy, but it's not as overwhelming. My supervisor that I have at my job right now, she is an 8 with a 9 wing, and sometimes she works remotely and sometimes she's physically on site, and we work together a lot when she's on site. When she's on site, I can tell that the energy in the room is a little bit different because she brings the energy with her. She's very much still, she comes in, she has a list of things that she wants to get done, and it's like jump right into it. Boom, 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 boom. Like one right after another. We don't stop to catch a breath. We don't stop to take a break. We just start on the list and tackle it. And then while we're in the middle of the list, she's come up with some other ideas, and she'll come back and be like, hey, when you get that done, here's 10 more things, and you only have 2 hours left, so hurry. kind of a thing. So she's got that 8 aggression, and she has that drive to come in and accomplish things. She comes in and she sees all of this stuff that needs to be done, and she is asserting her energy and her will unconsciously to make those things happen, to affect the change that she wants to see in her environment. But she also has a 9 wing, so she's really grounded about it, and she tends to have a more realistic understanding of where her limits are, which is another difference I would say is between 8 with 9 and 8 with 7. 8 with 7, I don't think that they understand that they have limits. And I don't say that to be mean. I just, they behave as such that I would assume that it's never occurred to them that they have limits, that there are things that they just can't do. They really think that they can conquer anything. 8s with a 9 wing very much seem to understand that they have a limit. Now, granted, they're still going to push against that, and what am I trying to say? The amount that they think that they can accomplish is still significantly more, I think, than someone like me, an Enneagram 6, would think. But like my supervisor is a really good example, because she'll push against something and she'll give us a list, and I'll work on something and I'll be on it for like 2 hours, and I've had 8 problems, and I'll come back to her and I'll say, hey, this is all the stuff I'm running into with this idea that you've had. I know that this is something we need to fix or get changed, but this is the stuff I'm running into. So she'll go and look at it, and she'll try to do it and see if she can't figure out how to get around it. And if she doesn't, she'll say, or if she can't, she'll say, well, okay, I guess this is something that's just not going to work out the way that I wanted it to work out. That's okay, because I came up with 12 other things that we could work on and get fixed. So let's go ahead and start on these 12 things. And so it's like she's just going to let that one go to the wayside, and she's going to take all of that energy, all of that force, and redirect it and put it back onto that list of things that's left that she believes she could still affect, right? So that's the difference, one of the differences between 8 with 7 and 8 with 9. Let me pull up my little bullet points here. An 8 with a 7 wing is more high-spirited and independent. Yes, they tend to be much more, high-spirited is one way to say it. I would say they tend to be more extroverted, and they tend to be more just high energy, is probably a better example. If you want, no, he's a 7 with an 8 wing. It's still the same type of energy. Okay, so this is what I would give you as an example. If you've ever seen the TV show Parks and Recreation, it's not on the air anymore. I think they did like 7 seasons, and it just recently they wrapped up their last one. I think it was last year. But anyways, Aziz Ansari is in that TV show, and he plays a character called Tom Haverford, who I love. Anyways, Tom is a 7 with an 8 wing, but he really embodies the same kind of energy that an 8 with a 7 wing would embody. Another really good example is, if you have ever seen on the History Channel, they had a TV show that ran a couple of years ago. I think they're doing season 4 right now, called Vikings, and they had, the guy's name always escapes me. Travis Fimmel? Is that his name? Anyways, he plays Ragnar Lothbrok, who is the main character of the whole series, and he is an 8 with a 7 wing, and his energy is just palpable. Just palpable. I mean, you could just cut it with a knife. It's almost like this solid thing that you could almost describe it tactilely. There's so much of it. It's very overwhelming. It radiates off of the screen, and I feel it just as I'm watching it. I'm like overwhelmed with this 8 with 7 energy, but it's awesome, and I love it, so I'm not complaining. But so he's another really good example of just the high level of energy, of extroversion, that an 8 with a 7 wing would bring into an environment versus 8 with 9. They tend to be a little bit more subdued, a little bit more laid back. They don't feel, I don't think, as much of a need to maintain. Okay, I'm going to use, this is a phrase that I like to use. This is a symbolic language, okay? But an 8 with a 9 wing does not feel the need, I don't think, to put their stake in as much energetic real estate. in a room at any given time. And by energetic real estate, I mean, like I've been referring to this whole time, anytime that you're in a room with anybody, I don't care if they're an 8 or what have you, everybody is always at any time bringing an energy into the room that they're in. If you've, you'll know this if you've ever been in a room full of people and somebody came in and you never heard a door open, nobody really announced them, but you just felt like someone was there that wasn't previously there, and you turn around and sure enough, someone was there. Or you've experienced it when you're in, maybe it's like a family holiday and you're, hanging out with your family and everybody's laughing and having a good time, and then somebody comes in who's in a really bad mood. They don't say anything, they don't address anybody, they just kind of pass through, or they come and sit down at the table or whatever, and they're just in a bad mood, and everybody kind of stops and is kind of doing the, oh, this is awkward thing. Why? They didn't really necessarily draw attention to their bad mood, but you could tell that it was there anyway, because everyone emits that kind of an energy. For those of you that may think that this sounds like, crazy new age weird stuff, they have done countless of scientific research experiments to measure this, social experiments. Lots of universities have done it. I just recently read one called The Ripple Effect, and I forget the guy's first name. Rothbard, I think, was the last name. But anyway, so I was in EBSCO and I was poking around and found it. It was pretty good. But so when I talk about energetic real estate, I'm just talking about that energy that you bring into the room. 8s, and again, I think it's unintentional for them. When you're an 8 and you have a 7 wing, 8s just in general are going to come in and take that energetic real estate. They just kind of come in, and all these people are in the room, and the unspoken message, that I get from the energy when an 8 comes in the room, it's as if they're coming in and they're just like, oh, this is mine. It's all mine. And they just take over it. And it's almost like suddenly you're in their space, and they're just nice enough to let you stay. Maybe. Yeah. 8s with a 7 wing are going to be more prone to do that. Again, Ragnar Lothbrok is a really good example. Tom Haverford, Parks and Recreation, is a really good example of that. Notice any time that they come on scene, they just, especially with Tom Haverford, even though he's a 7, it's still the same type of energy. He just like takes, it's as if there's no one else in the room. You know what I mean? He just acts as if he owns wherever he's at. 8s with a 9 wing, they don't do that. They tend to be a little bit more comfortable with their own space. And so for an 8 with a 9 wing, it's almost more like they're saying, this is my space. You can have that space over there. Don't come into my space, and we're not going to have any problems. So it's just kind of like they come in, they designate their space, and they're taking over that space, and it's silently understood that you don't need to encroach on that energy space that they have. You know what I mean? For an 8, an encroachment on energy space could be if you're being too clingy, if you're being too emotional, if you're asking stupid questions. Those are things that to an 8 are encroaching on their energy space, because they just don't have energy to put up with that. They're not going to give any energy to you. They are going to shut you off and shut you out because they don't want to deal with that. Okay? So I would say that is that's a good example. I do want to touch down how they said an 8 with a 7 wing is more independent than an 8 with a 9 wing. No. Okay, I would disagree with that, and here's why. 8s are an aggressive type. When you are an aggressive type, it means that you generate your own energy, and that you then take that energy that you generate and you put it forth into the world to make your way in the world. It's almost like you're just paving your own path for yourself, okay? 7s are also aggressive. So you have 2 aggressive types, and so it's just like double that aggressive energy. It's someone that's just basically like bazooka blasting their way through life. But 9s, really, they're not compliant types, and compliant types are where you're going to see more of a dependence on people. 9s are withdrawing types. Withdrawing types do the exact same thing as aggressive types in that they generate their own energy. The only difference is An aggressive type will generate the energy and then put it out into the world to help them get what they want, to help them make their way. A withdrawing type, like a 9, generates their own energy and then they just hold it inside. It's almost like money. It's like, today I have $2,000. I can only spend my $2,000 one time, so I'm going to go through life today, and anything that I see that's not worth $2,000 or that's not worth even part of that money, it's just going to get cut off. But they're not really aggressive about it. They're just kind of real friendly, and they just kind of, 9s are a little bit different. They can make it seem very much like they're engaged when they're not engaged. And what that is a way of building up that reservoir to keep that energy in. But, for a 9, if something comes along and they decide, I think I could spend a little energy on this today, they'll spend the energy on it today, but it's got to be worth it to them. And what's worth it to each 9 is different, right? Just like what brings, in the Enneagram, we use the language lustful pleasure. What brings lustful pleasure to an 8? Each 8 is different. So when you have an 8 with a 9 wing, you still have somebody that's generating their own energy. These people are not compliant people. Again, compliant people are the types that are going to be going outside of themselves for energy and for direction and for orientation. 9s are not like that. 8s are not like that. So I would say an 8 with a 9 wing is still very, very much an extremely independent person. Although I will say an 8 with a 7 wing is not at all going to be willing to listen to what you have to say, because they tend to think that they have all the answers. They're very self-directed. They've already got what they need. And to be fair, an 8 with a 9 wing is still the same way, but because they have that 9 wing, they're going to be a little bit more willing to merge for a little while. They'll have that skill of being able to appear as if they're listening, to appear as if they're taking in what you're saying. They may even consider it just for fun. Whether or not they take it seriously or not is going to be dependent on the 8. If they've got their own mind made up, I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but they're very good at, an 8 with a 7 wing isn't going to give you the time of day to, deposit into them or to deposit into their life, because they don't think that they need that. They think they've already got everything that they need, so they're just going to run with that. Do you know what I mean? Again, all of it is very unconscious. An 8 with a 9 wing is just really good at appeasing people. Does that make sense? Still very independent. They're just really good at making it look like you're having more of an impact on them than perhaps you are. And I'm not saying that all 8s who have a 9 wing are that. Like my supervisor, she is an exception though, because she is an extremely well integrated 8. I mean, that woman practically lives in 2 at this point. It's awesome. So she genuinely has gotten to that place where she has learned to care very, very deeply for others. And she very much spends her life in the service of other people. She is a fantastic individual. So she's kind of an exception to this rule, but again, she's very well developed, very well integrated. She's been through a lot of healing. So she's gotten to put past a lot of that personality to get to the heart of who God made her to be. She's an exception. Most people don't live that way anymore. So I liked that. That was a pretty good point. What else do we have here? A 8 with a 7 wing tends to be far more adventurous. Absolutely. Yeah, so I know that I talked about when you have someone who, their sin is gluttony, and you're mixing them with someone whose sin is lust, what that looks like. But I will say, when you're an 8 and you have a 7 wing, you do tend to have a bigger need for variety, for change, for adventure, for excitement. When you have an 8 with a 9 wing, that 9 wing, 9s tend to be a little bit more stable. They're very adaptable. They can roll with change if they have to, but 9s don't like change necessarily just for the sake of change, but they don't want to be confined by routine either. 9s just want to be happy. They just want to be happy, left alone, to live however it is that they feel that they want to live. So when you have an 8 that has a little bit of that energy mixed up into it, you have an 8 that's going to be a little bit more at peace with adhering to a routine or to living a lifestyle that may be a bit slower, that may not be quite as boisterous as that of an 8 with a 7 wing. They won't have that inner drive to constantly be distracted, like an 8 with a 7 wing would. They can kind of just take things as they come, and that's life, and sometimes it's exciting and sometimes it's not, but they're not upset if it's not. Does that make sense? So, they're a little bit more comfortable. I mean, with routine, yes, but just in the mundane, they're better at working with that than an 8 with a 7 wing would be. 8s with a 7 wing are willing to try new things in their personal and professional lives for the sake of experimentation and enjoyment. Yes, I would say that's 10,000% true. I would say, but an 8, listen, 8s who have 9 wings won't turn that down if it's offered to them. They'd probably be up for it because, again, keep in mind that type 9 is a merging type, and so they're drawing on some of that energy as well. So they are still probably going to be willing to just, be down for whatever. I would say the difference is an 8 with a 7 wing will probably instigate the behavior. Like, they would probably go out to find something different. They would go out to find something new just for the sake of experimentation. They'll seek it out. An 8 with a 9 wing, I don't think necessarily is going to seek it out, but if it comes up, I don't necessarily think they would turn it down either. They may say, yeah, I'm down for that. I'm cool. We'll give it a try. We'll see how it goes. And then if they don't like it, they bow out, just the same as an 8 with a 7 would. So I think that it's true for both, but the difference is an 8 with a 7 will seek it out, and an 8 with a 9 will just wait until it comes to them. At least in most cases, I would imagine that's the case. 8s with a 9 wing, they are more interpersonally warmer. That's kind of a weird way to say it. So basically, they have better people skills, I guess is what this app is trying to say. They're good at seeming like they care, more so than an 8 with a 7 wing. And I will say that's true. 8s with a... Listen, so when you're an aggressive type, it means that your weakest function, your repressed function, is your feeling function. That means you are operating out of life with thinking and doing, thinking and doing, thinking and doing. You're doing things and you're thinking about how can I keep doing things and all of this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, you're a feeling repressed type. So you're not considering the decisions that you're making through the perspective of its relational affect. Now, to be fair, again, just because you're an 8 with a 9 wing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be better at that. But again, it comes down to that 9's ability to merge that 8s tend to draw on if you have a 9 wing. It's that ability to, how should I say it? To portray yourself in such a way that you're non-threatening. You're almost just, you're choosing to make room for somebody else's feelings, somebody else's perspective in the room, somebody else's agenda, for the sake of maintaining the peace. It's actually, if you're an 8 with a 9 wing, it's a very strategic move most of the time. Unless you've integrated, you're very well integrated. Again, like my supervisor, she does it because she genuinely wants to do it. It grieves her if she knows that someone feels like they aren't wanted or if they feel like they don't fit in on her team. She goes great lengths to make sure that we all understand that we, that we're unique and we provide things to that team. So that's a very integrated 8 perspective. But anyways, so I would say it's not necessarily that they're interpersonally warmer. They're just very good at appearing that way, if that makes sense. I don't know if that made any sense. 8s with a 9 wing are more calm. Yes, I think I kind of touched on that a little bit. Oh, I'm pretty much out of time. I should stop. That's okay. We've pretty much touched on just about everything because now it's getting pretty repetitive. So that's a little bit about 8 with 7 versus 8 with 9. So I'll come back and we'll do my video just on Enneagram Type 8 itself. I don't know when, but when I get some time. So thanks.